Hello, glad you could join us. This is Keith Johnson, and I'm a member of the Board Smart faculty. Today, we are talking with Bob Conlin, who's the Secretary of the Wisconsin Department of Employee Trust Funds, and who works with many different boards on the benefit side of the Wisconsin retirement system. Bob is going to talk to us about his educational and training programs that are in place at ETF, that's the Employee Trust Funds agency for their board members. Welcome, Bob. Glad you could join us.
Thanks, Keith. Good to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about the complex structure that you have at ETF. How many boards and board members do you have?
Yeah, so ETF is a state agency in Wisconsin, and we were long ago tapped as basically the fringe benefit agency in the state of Wisconsin. But we have about 13 other fringe benefit programs for public employees around the state of Wisconsin. And it may seem as though for each benefit we have a different board that goes along with that. It's not quite that extensive, but I've got 5 boards that I deal with regularly that oversee various aspects and components of the benefit programs that we administer. So, for example, the ETF board is kind of the big board, the board that has primary administrative oversight over everything we do at the department. They appoint me, they approve actuary recommendations and valuations and contribution rates and things like that. So they're kind of the big kahuna. That's a 13-member board. In addition, when they created the Wisconsin retirement system through merger of several other pension systems back in the early 80s, they created a couple of advisory boards to see that merger through and make sure things went okay. That would be the Wisconsin Retirement Board and the Teachers Retirement Board. So the Teachers Board is pretty much responsible for looking out for the interest of teachers at the time of merger, and the Wisconsin Retirement Board was everybody else that was going to be in the WRS. The Wisconsin Retirement Board has 9 members. The Teachers Retirement Board has 13 members. We also run a number of insurance-based programs like the State of Wisconsin Employee Health Program, life insurance, disability insurance programs. That has a separate board called the Group Insurance Board. That has 11 members that serve on that. And then finally, our Section 457 Deferred Compensation Supplemental Retirement Savings Program is overseen by a 5-member board. So that's 5 members, 50-some, 60 appointees. There's some overlap, and some of them serve on multiple boards.
Well, that's a whole lot of fiduciary board members. So how do you go about onboarding and training new board members when they come onto one of these boards? What's your process for that? It must be pretty complex.
Yeah, it's complex, but we try to make it as easy for them as possible. Many of our board positions are staggered, and so we seldom have large turnover. So we're usually dealing with a few board members at a time, but we reach out to them upon their appointment or election to the board. They all seem eager to want to come in. We usually schedule a several-hour orientation session with them that covers nuts and bolts of, where do you go for the meeting? How do you get reimbursed for your expenses? How do we get materials to you? That sort of thing. But then we also spend a good bit of time introducing them to the department, what we do generally. We spend some time talking about what is in their purview, depending on which board they are on, and They usually spend some time talking with the program manager or somebody who serves in that role about the nuts and bolts of the program. We have essentially a welcome packet. All of our boards have governance manuals and some additional material that we make sure they have. Some of it is the basics of the open meetings law and public records law. Some of it is fact sheets about the programs that they oversee, the participant numbers, all that sort of thing. So we usually give them a lot of take-home reading. We try to get that to them before they come in for their orientation session so they can ask questions and we can have a good back and forth with them. And we usually get pretty good take-up on that. The boards have not really implemented any sort of mandatory, you have to take, the orientation or you have to do education and training during your tenure, but we get good take up on it anyway. Almost everybody that's new to the board comes in for a meeting, for an orientation, and that's gratifying. And we usually find that those people then they then feel more comfortable about calling me or calling somebody else in the organization to get their questions answered and things like that.
So are these onboarding meetings usually done collectively with more than one board member, or are they done individually?
So we will take a new class. So if we have several new board members coming in at the same time, for example, after teacher elections, maybe we have 3 or 4 new teachers coming onto the board, we'll try to coordinate it so that they can come in together. It builds a little more sense of camaraderie. If you have multiple people there, we find some value. Somebody might have a question that somebody else wouldn't have thought of, and it's not only is it more efficient for our time, but it's actually perhaps a better educational tool. If it's the individual, one person, we'll bring them in and we'll spend some more quality time with that individual and make sure their questions are answered.
So do they get a chance to see and be introduced to the key staff members that they'll be dealing with?
Yes. Typically, the lead staff person who will be running or assisting in the running of the board meeting will be there and kind of lead them through some of the finer points of the programs that they oversee and what's on the board's agenda. Myself kind of provide the higher level, where does this fit in the grander scheme of things? What's going on with the legislature? Where are we going as an organization? What are our priorities? That sort of thing. But yeah, they get exposed to the staff that they'll be dealing with on a regular basis.
Are there any particular issues that you've found to be challenging to new board members coming on for the first time and understanding what their roles are going to be?
Yeah, so our board members come from various walks of life and they find their way to the boards through various means. Some are appointed by the governor, some are elected by the membership, some are appointed by other entities or at least recommended by other entities. So they all come from with different perspectives and from different backgrounds. I think one of the things that is challenging for any new board member that we have is just that which cap are they wearing? Are they wearing their non-board member cap, or are they wearing their governor appointed me cap or the local government finance cap? That's always a struggle, and we value the experiences they bring and the experiences that they've had, and but we really stress with them, as I know anybody who does fiduciary training does, that when you're on these boards, you have one hat that you are wearing, and stressing that right from the get-go usually gets through, and we usually don't have a lot of issues with that. I think for some folks like ex officio folks who have a role in state government or local government and are there, it's always more of a struggle to disassociate themselves with that. I know in the past we have heard the phrase, my constituents want, or my constituents expect, which, you know, we hear a lot in politics and all that sort of thing, but it has a different dynamic on a fiduciary trustee board. And then we do periodically bring in outside specialists to train and answer questions on fiduciary responsibility, as you know. And I think most of those issues tend to not rise up. We do get questions periodically, hey, I'm wrestling with this conflict or what I think is a conflict. And that's what we want board members to do. We want board members to be aware, to be self-aware of the situations and the conflicts, and how are they supposed to approach the policy issues and the decisions they have to make as a board member, knowing that they have all this background with them. So if they're asking those questions, we feel pretty good about our training and that sort of thing. If you have somebody that wants to or has a tendency to want to micromanage, I think the way to defeat that is to give them enough so that they trust that you're doing the right things, that, you know, they can focus their time on other things, that you've got the administrative stuff under control. I think one of the things that's hard for all trustees to do, especially in this space, is all of their meetings are public. They're public meetings. And getting board members to, I think, sometimes say things out loud is tough. And then sometimes not say things out loud is tough. So working in the public space can be a challenge with that, especially with new board members coming in. You're always in the fishbowl, as they say.
Well, I'd like to ask about the ongoing education process that you have. In a way, as a new board member coming into a retirement system, it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. There's so much to learn if you haven't been familiar with the concepts. Is the education program that you use extended out over a time period? How is the flow of information and training staged?
Great question. We focus on making sure that every board meeting has some sort of educational component to it. So we have certain things that we have on a cycle, whether it's the open meetings law, public records law, the state ethics requirements. We have those on a cycle that they're coming before the board every year or whatever the cycle is. But our boards are responsible for overseeing, you know, substantive benefit programs. And so one of the challenges is our actuaries are presenting at almost every meeting, some valuation, some experience study, some actuarial work. We have partnered with them, and part of every presentation will have a section on either something about current trends in the industry, in the pension industry, what's going on, new GASB standards, new, you know, whatever. They'll talk about that, or they'll do a little deeper dive into a particular aspect of our benefits that plays a regular role, but doesn't necessarily get deep attention. So they've been very helpful in doing that, so that every meeting, board members are getting some exposure to something. We also, for example, the group insurance board has a lot more authority to set policy and benefit design for the programs. So if you were a conscientious reader of our memos, you would catch that we are repeating a lot from memo to memo to memo to memo. And then our presentations to the board will have our experts, whether it's the actuaries, whether it's our staff. They make plenty of time in their presentations for Q&A to make sure that people are understanding both the ask that we're making as well as the substance behind it. And we try to anticipate those questions in the memos and the presentations that we do. So while it may not be formal, get on a plane, go to a conference type of training, we think that we provide a lot of brain food that is more targeted and perhaps more relevant to what our board members are doing, and we keep it in front of them on a regular basis. We do not have a huge training budget for our 60 some board members that we're dealing with, and that's one of the reasons why we brought a lot of this stuff in-house. But the training programs that I go to, the administrative conferences, I think a lot of that is useful. One of the proposals we have that we are working on is to streamline our boards, to get down to 3 boards as opposed to the 5 boards. That would, I think, enable us to perhaps invest more in some more formal training offsite and things like that. We have not been in a position to do much on that external training just because of the numbers of people that we're dealing with.
Are there any particular training concepts or resources, methodologies that you found to be particularly useful and might recommend to other pension funds?
Having a ready source like on demand training available. I mentioned we've done some in-house videos for our board members that are always out there and ready to go. I think our board members also find useful our member training, the training we put on, the videos we put out there for our members to understand their benefits better. I think making those sorts of things available to them when they want them, as opposed to just when they come to a board meeting, I think is something I would like to expand our ability to provide in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. We really appreciate you spending the time with us today. And viewers are encouraged to go to boardsmart.com, where there are other resources and training materials that are targeted to public pension fund trustees and senior staff members. Bob, thank you again for joining us.
Thanks, Keith.